All right, hi, welcome to the Fantasy Six Pack Network. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. We're going to be talking some Seattle Seahawks football here with Mookie Alexander from managing editor over at Field Goals with SB Nation. How's it going on, man?
It's going all right, Joe. Just hyped that football is back in our lives. And really, the preseason is just the appetizer, as I said on the podcast and normally on the Hawk Zone Rundown. So we're waiting for the main course very soon. But yeah, this will do for now. Just having any dopamine hit of NFL football on my television screen is going to do for me right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Came from a big fantasy football weekend up there in Canton, and this whole weekend just talking football, watching football on the screens. It was fantastic. So, but going to be jumping into some questions here. But before we do that, just remind everybody, hit that like button, those subscribe buttons, leave those comments. We love to hear from you. And go over to fantasysixpack.net/plans. Become an All Access member. You're going to get access to our award-winning rankings, our draft cheat sheet. We got player projections during the season. Well, got tons of betting and DFS stuff for you as well. So use promo code F6PPod to save 15%. All right, Mookie, I am ready to jump in if you are.
Yeah, I'm ready to roll.
All right, so new quarterback over here in Seattle, Sam Darnold comes from the Vikings when he had quite the season last year, and so now, what does he look like in this new offensive system with Klint Kubiak?
So far, based on I went to two training camps a couple weeks back, or maybe a week and a half ago at this point. So one at the team headquarters and then one at Lumen Field. And the one thing about Klint Kubiak's offense is it's not going to be an exact replica of what we saw with Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings, but they're going to be similar enough concepts that it's not going to be like a culture shock being in Kubiak's offense compared to O'Connell's offense. What I mean by that is a lot of under center stuff. So the Vikings were 31st in the NFL in shotgun rates, and that's according to FTN fantasy data. When Kubiak had his 1 year with the Saints, and we know that was a season that very quickly came unraveled due to injuries after 2 weeks, he was still 28th in shotgun rates. So it's not surprising. Kubiak, O'Connell, if they're coming from Sean McVay or they're coming from Kyle Shanahan, they're therefore coming under Mike Shanahan, and Mike Shanahan not exactly Mr. Run and Shoot shotgun heavy offense, no, from his Denver Broncos days. So I think that Darnold has looked pretty good in camp thus far, and we'll see if he plays any bit in the preseason. If he does, it'll probably be against the Chiefs on Friday. But he looks like he's getting the ball out on time. He's making good reads. He's going through his progressions. He's making accurate throws. So I'm not anticipating that Darnold is going to have the same incredibly high volume statistics and super impressive touchdown to interception ratio that he had in Minnesota. I expect him to be passing less in this offense, but if he can still maintain good efficiency, then he'll still be an above average starting quarterback. And the one thing that is clear is that as good as Jaxon Smith-Njigba is and is projected to be, and as good as Cooper Kupp has been throughout his career, they're not Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So this is going to be a real test of Kubiak's offense and Darnold as a quarterback, not having the same top end weapons that he did in Minnesota.
Right. Yeah, go when you drop down from Justin Jefferson. That's a different ball game. That's hard to replicate. All right, let's go jump over here to the backfield, and Kenneth Walker throughout his career has dealt with injuries, but when he seems to be healthy, he has gotten a lion's share of the work. So Zach Charbonnet, when he fills in though, is also amazing, but for some reason they just don't use both of them regularly enough, I feel like. With this new system, are we seeing more of a 50-50 split, or is it still really leaning on Kenneth Walker when he's out there?
You know, what's interesting, you bring up Walker's injury history because he's missed a few camp days this year due to a sore foot. And I guess they want to be very cautious regarding Walker and anything to do with potential injury or something that could end up becoming worse. Whereas Charbonnet, I can't recall him missing any time. So as you mentioned, they weren't used enough last year, and that's due to the pass heavy nature of Ryan Grubb and the former Seahawks offensive coordinator. And even when they were used, the running game was just not very effective because the offensive line was poor and the play calling was way too predictable. So will we see a split this year that could be like a 1A, 1B situation? I don't rule it out, but I think that what separates Walker from Charbonnet is Walker has got that little extra burst, that speed to turn would be like moderate gains into huge gains. Now, with that said, he hasn't really had that the last couple of seasons. I think his longest run last year was only 24 yards, where Charbonnet started to be a more effective, and in fact, he was a more efficient back than Walker last year. I think this wide zone scheme and a lot of this zone blocking stuff could benefit somebody like Charbonnet a little bit more than Kenneth Walker. Walker can freelance at times, and sometimes that works out really, really well, and that's why he's so exciting to watch. And other times it can lead to no gain or loss of yards on the play. So I think that Walker's still going to be the running back one, the RB1, but there could be some weeks where, okay, it's a Charbonnet week. This is not Walker's day. So we're going to have Charbonnet get more carries, or other weeks where
Hmm.
we need more speed on the perimeter. So Charbonnet not going to be the guy. We're going to give the lion's share of the carries to Walker. So last year, the split was close to even, but that's because Walker missed so many games.
Right.
So I think that Walker is still going to get the majority of the carries, but let's say like, I don't know, 70 to 30, somewhere in that ballpark, where I think that they're going to have roles for Charbonnet in this offense. But Walker's still going to be the main guy. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. But the key thing to note is that they've been trying heavily to emphasize we're going to run the ball, not run the ball more, just that, but run the ball more and run the ball well. And so far through camp and in preseason, it looks like they're putting their money where their mouth is as far as wanting to lean on the ground game. So that should give both Walker and Charbonnet more opportunities to show what they've got, because they're both very talented backs. They're not the same type of back, but they're both very talented.
No, it makes perfect sense. All right, jumping back over here to the passing game, and we'll check into this receiving room. So they obviously no more DK Metcalf. They bring in Cooper Kupp. We mentioned JSN. Are the days of Cooper Kupp being a dominant receiver just way behind him at this point? And if so, like, what kind of role is he looking like he's in with this team?
If you're expecting MVP, well, no, he wasn't MVP. Well, he was Super Bowl MVP, but he was also Offensive Player of the Year, I think, in 2021, the Triple Crown, whatever.
Right.
That version of Cooper Kupp is gone. Like, that's not happening. His numbers since then with the Rams have dropped, and some of it, the games he missed due to injury, so he didn't have opportunities to increase his catches and yards and touchdowns. But even still, his yards after catch, I think, was the lowest of his career last year. In terms of his ability to get open, it looks like it's not that strength of his, not as great as it used to be, but I still think he can be a valuable piece in Seattle's offense. And from what I've seen of him in training camp thus far, because again, he didn't play the preseason opener against the Raiders, he looks sharp coming out of his breaks. He looks like he's still the pristine route runner. What I don't anticipate is Kupp being a guy that you're going to look at deep down the field. He's going to be, to me, more that move the chains kind of guy at wide receiver, like a tall possession receiver who's also going to be a factor as a blocker, but you don't exactly get fantasy points for a good block. So with,
No, you do not.
yeah, so with Cooper Kupp, he's not the wide receiver one on this team. It is undeniably Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
Mhm.
Now, is JSN going to get 100 catches again? Again, don't think that we're going to see that, because I don't believe that they're going to throw at such an exorbitant rate. If they do, then that means the Seahawks are spending way too much time trailing. So Smith-Njigba, maybe his yards per game, his yards per catch could increase, because they've had him kind of like, he had 100 catches, but for like 1,100 yards. But I'd like to see them try and get more chunk plays with Smith-Njigba. It doesn't have to be deep bombs, because that's not really his game, but sort of like those mini explosive 10 to 19 yards more often. So getting back to Kupp, he's probably not going to be somebody who's going to be on your radar really to draft in fantasy, period. Because as a wide receiver too, on an offense that is less likely to be reliant on the passing game, I think that they're going to go to him at the rate that your typical second wide receiver would be targeted, but not at the rate that the Rams had. So his last year, he had like 67 catches for 700 something yards, 5 touchdowns. So that's not bad. That's not washed up numbers or anything, but that's probably like the best case scenario to me out of the 2025 version of Cooper Kupp, where He's still getting his catches. He might give you the old vintage Cooper Kupp game here and there, but he's not going to be that 2021 guy or
Yeah.
20, even the 2018 guy because he tore
Yeah.
his ACL back then too. So, he's 32 years old, and wide receivers after the age of 30, they tend not to age very well. So, yeah, Kupp is past his prime, but that doesn't mean he is a completely cooked product.
Yeah. Just real quick, who seems to be running in the slot more? Is it JSN or is it Kupp?
I think that they've been going kind of at the same general splitting of slot duties, but I think what we're going to see in Kubiak's offense is nobody is going to be kind of pigeonholed into a defined slot role.
Okay.
If I were to guess, I'd say Kupp in the slot more than Smith-Njigba, and that Smith-Njigba is going to show, yeah, I can be, a flanker. I can be a slot guy. I can be a guy on the outside. Whereas Kupp, I think that he can still do some tremendous damage in the slot. So we're going to see more of
Okay.
Smith-Njigba in varied roles, whereas Kupp, I think he'll play both. He'll be on the outside and he'll be in the slot, but I believe that he'll be more in the slot in Kubiak's offense.
Okay. And so they let Noah Fant go, which I think surprised a lot of people. And of course, they brought in the rookie, Elijah Arroyo. Um, is he looking like he's in for a pretty massive role in this offense?
I think he's in for a significant role, but not to the point where he would be the tight end one. So Noah Fant getting let go was not a surprise to me if you told me at the start of the offseason that he was a cap casualty. I think the surprise was the timing of which he was let go, which is the week before training camp.
Right.
But what it tells me is that based on the contract that the Bengals gave him, which was what, $3-4 million, nobody wanted to trade for the last year of his deal. Like it was a net negative. No point in acquiring that contract. So, yes, they drafted Elijah Arroyo out of the University of Miami in the second round, and he was one of my top targets. If they couldn't get a receiver early, then at least go for a pass catching tight end. And so far, Arroyo has looked like a smooth route runner with impressive hands. So I think that Arroyo in the long term could be that franchise tight end the Seahawks have been clamoring for because, fun fact, Jimmy Graham holds all the Seahawks tight end records. And he was here for essentially less than 3 seasons when you factor in how many games he missed due to injury in his first year here. So for Arroyo, I think in the longer term, he could be an eventual tight end one. But in the meantime, AJ Barner was kind of a revelation for the Seahawks last year. He had, I think, 30 catches, 200 something yards, and 4 touchdowns. Again, not amazing numbers, but he was playing behind Noah Fant and at times Farrell Brown. But Barner is kind of that's steady hands, two-way type of blocking tight end and receiving tight end. He was more known as a blocking tight end, and he showcased his receiving chops. So one thing that I noticed a lot in training camp is the use of those seam busting routes. How do you beat a cover two? Go try and attack the seams, and Barner was part of the equation. So I think they're going to utilize Barner more in the passing game, and that Arroyo is going to get his opportunities. And don't be surprised if Arroyo is, especially in 12 personnel, occasionally they split him out as kind of like a bigger bodied receiver in a way that Barner really isn't. So yeah, again, Barner I think is going to get the bulk of the targets at tight end. But Arroyo is going to be an intriguing player to watch because if he does flash all of that receiving promise early, then they might flip those roles in the middle of the season where Arroyo is kind of like your top receiving tight end and Barner is your jack of all trades tight end.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get both of them super cheap at draft still because nobody knows.
Yes.
So, all right. I'd like to close things up here, asking every single one of our guests on that covers our team the same question. And it's who's a player in camp that you've noticed has kind of caught your eye, that a little under the radar, that fantasy managers, maybe we're not drafting them still, but we put them on our little watch list and we're saying, hey, I'm going to pay attention to this guy.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that Torrey Horton, the rookie out of Colorado State,
Mm-hmm.
5th-round pick. I had a tweet pop off at the time at the end of the first training camp that I went to, where I said Torrey Horton might be the one, and I went, man, I've had so much better tweets go unnoticed than that one. But that aside, Horton kind of got famous because of what he did against Colorado a couple years back, especially against Travis Hunter, where he was torching that Colorado defense. And then he had the knee injury last year. So I think that hurt his draft stock. Not even I know it hurt his draft stock significantly because he was probably going to be an early day 2 pick. And then he falls all the way to the 5th round. But this guy is a valuable, potentially valuable punt and kick returner. I mean, he returned multiple punts for touchdowns back at Colorado State. But what he's done as a receiver so far, he went from playing with the twos in training camp to now he's getting reps with the first team offense. He was getting them in
Oh,
camp.
okay.
He was getting them in the preseason game. I know Drew Lock was starting, but for the quote first teamers who did play on the offensive line, they had Horton as one of the top options at receiver, such that it is not a lock anymore that Marquez Valdez-Scantling is going to make the roster, even with the guaranteed money the Seahawks gave him. So if we are to assume Horton is on this team, I think he could be the 3rd receiver for the Seahawks. And he had a great debut at preseason, 3 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. And he could add an even bigger play, but Drew Lock just straight didn't see him running open for a likely 60-yard score. So I think he's an excellent route runner. He's impressed with his hands catching. I like to see what he does when he's got to take on contact, but his speed is also something that I think is going to be important for the Seahawks because they don't necessarily have great speed at the position. So with Horton, even if he's like a dynasty league play, I would keep an eye out on Torrey Horton as like a top level receiver for the Seahawks over the next couple of seasons. Because let's say that Cooper Kupp gets injured again, I think that they would have Horton be the wide receiver too, over Valdez-Scantling or anybody else on that depth chart. And Kupp is on a 3-year deal, but they can get out of it realistically after 1. I think in very, very short order, Torrey Horton is going to be alongside Smith-Njigba as your new duo. So gone are the days of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's now, I think, by 2026, I think it's going to be Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Torrey Horton. So yes, I am a homer in this sense, and I absolutely wanted Horton in the draft, but I truly believe that Horton is going to be one of the big steals of the 2025 draft, and he'll show up right away in this Seahawks offense.
I think good stuff. Yeah, I know he's a fairly popular dynasty pick, just not so much in redraft. But yeah, that's a great one. We'll have to keep an eye out for him. So, all right, well, thank you for jumping on here and talking some Seattle Seahawks with us. Before we close out, though, let's give everybody let us know. Yeah, let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on this season.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter/X at Mookie Alexander. I also run the Field Goals account, which is at Field Goals. And I'm also over on Blue Sky. If you prefer Blue Skies, it's just these same ats, but just .bsky.social, whatever stuff they add on that makes the
Yeah.
character count, frankly, way too long. But over at Field Goals, we got a wide variety of content, including breakdowns of the rookies, the much maligned, but hopefully no longer bad offensive line, some game preview coming up against the Chiefs. And it's going to be another exciting year, we hope, for the Seattle Seahawks, but a little bit better than the last few years. Like turn these winning records into a playoff appearance and maybe a playoff win, because it's been a bit too long since this team last won a playoff game.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again. And if for those of you still here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and become an all access member of Fantasy Six Pack. Check out the videos. The playlist will pop up somewhere down here, I think. And we will see you next time.